You're listening to the Mindset School Podcast, episode 19. Hey, friends, welcome to the Mindset School Podcast with Peggy Easterling, where we learn to smile authentically from the inside out.
When all your life you've been told by either by words or by actions or just by circumstances to sit down, shut up, and take it. It's hard to start talking, but once you do, there is power and there's healing that comes with the release of that pain.
I had never heard the term glass child until I met Shari Collins. Shari's a beautiful woman of God who overcame the trauma of being a glass child. After her family made the decision to adopt, they adopted children into their family and welcomed them into their home. And while they expected a beautiful, happy adoption, what came next was very traumatic to Shari as well as her family. Listen as Shari explains what is a glass child, and she teaches us how she overcame her childhood trauma, and now she helps other glass children do the same. Hello, Shari. How are you today?
I am doing well, Peggy. Thank you so much for having me.
So good to see you. So I am so excited about today. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. So my name, as you said, is Shari, and my background, honestly, I was the sibling of somebody with a severe mental illness. And so that's the people that I try to help because I lived that. We had wound up adopting a set of twin boys from Sierra Leone, Africa when I was 5 years old. And they were about 6 months younger than I was. And for a long time, we thought it was just culture shock and it was this, that, or the other. Over time, we learned, as it turns out, this was reactive attachment disorder. This was oppositional defiance disorder. This was sociopathic tendencies. This was psychopathic tendencies. This was an utter lack of a conscience. This was violence. This was a whole host of things. And so what I learned pretty quick was I taught myself to be invisible to survive, because if I didn't, basically, if they forgot I was there, I was as safe as I could be living with that. And so I taught myself to put on a mask and to hide my pain from my parents and everybody else around me, because I thought that since my parents were dealing with all of this, they didn't have time to deal with me too. So I did everything in my power to make sure that they thought I had no problems, that I was good, that I lied to myself and I told myself that I could take it. And eventually I figured out that I couldn't, and I started reaching out for help and getting counseling. And that's a little bit of the background behind why I do what I do, because I know how much I needed it and I didn't get it.
So, how old were you when they came to join your family?
I was 5 years old when the adoption was finalized and they actually joined our family. And I was, I think, 9. I was dissociated for a lot of my childhood, so it's a little bit of a blur. I think I was 9 when one of them left because he got so physically violent it wasn't safe for the rest of us in the house. And then when I was 12 years old, the other one burned our house down. And that was a traumatic event on top of all the day-to-day trauma that was there. But the good news is God definitely used that to lead us to a counselor who finally understood what was going on and was able to get us the help that we needed. So, silver linings.
Right. So, do you remember a life before? That's pretty young. Do you
It
remember up
was.
until 5, like what life was like?
Not really. I mean, like you said, it was pretty young. Most of what I remember is we lived in North Dakota at the time. So I remember some snow. I remember some mosquitoes. I remember me and my sister playing with the stuffed animals and the Barbies on the floor. But I don't really remember a whole lot. Living with the twins and all of that mental illness in the house is most of what I remember as a child.
Wow. So your parents, what was your relationship with them? What did it look like in the stages of that process?
In the beginning, we really thought the adoption would bring us all closer as a family, and so there was a lot of intentional family time. But my father was active duty military, so pretty soon after he had to deploy. And so then it was just my mom at home with me, my sister, and our adopted siblings. And then my biological brother was born a little bit later. And so a lot of it was my dad would go to work, he would come home, he would deal with the chaos from the twins, he would comfort my mom, I would get a hug goodnight. And so I distinctly remember there was one point when I think I was about 7, I just crawled up on his lap and asked him if he still loved me because I didn't see him and I honestly wasn't sure anymore. And I mean, I love my father dearly and it utterly shocked him. He was not expecting that. And because he genuinely did love me, he made some adjustments pretty quick to make sure that I knew that, for which I am very thankful. I know not everybody has that, but it was just a little bit distant at that stage with both of my parents because my mom was focused on the fire in front of her and trying to make sure all of her children stayed alive. And making sure we all stayed alive sometimes meant I was the mini parent who took my younger siblings into the room off to the side, and I would help entertain them and grab them snacks and do this, that, or the other.
So you said you were the mini parent. Do you think at that age you were capable of being the mini parent? And do you
Oh,
think that
absolutely not.
yeah, yeah. So grabbing that hat and putting that on as an expectation of yourself as part of your
Mhm.
identity, that caused you some trauma in itself. Can you speak more to that?
I definitely had to grow up way too quick, and I got very good at lying to myself and telling myself that I could take it, that I was old enough to take care of my younger siblings, that I was old enough to be my mother's emotional support, that I was old enough to help take care of the house when my dad was on deployment, and I absolutely wasn't, and there was a part of me that really knew that, but if I admitted that, I would fall apart, so I got really good at lying to myself and everybody around me, and everybody around me thought that I was fine, and they thought that I was just the responsible older sister who was helping out. And I don't think anybody, including me at the time, realized just how deep it went. But it was definitely a learning curve because once the twins were out of the house, I still kept doing those things because at that point it was a habit. Like you said, it was my identity, and I had no idea how to stop even after I realized I probably shouldn't be. And honestly, it caused some friction with my younger siblings too, because they knew I wasn't their parent, but I was acting like it. And because it was not a role I was prepared to take or should have taken, I absolutely failed at doing it. I couldn't keep them safe. And we all knew it. I couldn't keep them fed. If there was food in the pantry, I could get it, but I couldn't go to the store and make sure we had food in the pantry. My mom did that, and she did it well, and we always had food on the table, which I appreciated, but there was a lot of other trauma that happened to all 3 of us when my parents weren't looking that I couldn't stop.
Mm. When you hear other people talk about adoption and their excitement surrounding it, what kind of emotion does that spur for you?
Honestly, it's a bit of a duality. There's a part of me that is excited that they're excited and that hopes it works out for them, and there's a part of me that wants to say, "Oh, you poor souls. You have no idea what you're getting into." But I also know not every adoption works out the way that ours did. And so it's a mixed bag of emotions. There's a part of me that says, "Why are you excited? You don't know the hell you're about to go through." And there's a part of me that says, "Wait a minute, theirs might work out." And then I go into a little bit of a spiral, at least I used to, because ours didn't, and that was hard when I ran into into adoptions that worked out well.
Yeah. I think definitely there's a need there. There's a space for these kids. They have no space, they have no one.
Yeah.
And for them to need someone in their lives, and even these kids with mental illness, it takes a special type of person and in special type of environment to be able to accommodate that and to direct that to make it positive. So when you think about like the community that you're building, I know that they are a lot of people that need to vent some negative emotion, but at the same time, the encouragement and the positivity that you would want to provide in that space. What's your game plan to keep that community from a negative space, but to bring hope and healing and health to those women who experienced the same thing that you have in life?
A lot of it comes down to the reframe, which is actually something I learned listening to a lot of your podcasts and why I'm so glad we get to talk about it today because you're absolutely right. If you keep stuffing those negative emotions down, you're just going to have so many problems later. And I know because I did that. But I also know that for me to heal, I had to be able to express those and to say them in a place where there was no judgment, where I could say all of the horrible things I was thinking and feeling and nobody told me I shouldn't be thinking or feeling that. Instead, what they did was they reframed it and they said, yeah, that happened and that sucked, but that doesn't have to define you. There's an and, there's a next page. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There is healing. There is hope. There is a chance for tomorrow to be a better day. And so it's that reframe of, yeah, that happened and that sucked. And I'm so sorry it happened to you. The question is, what's the next step into healing? Because sometimes you got to let it all out and then you say, oh, I feel better. Okay, now that I've expressed all those negative emotions, I can think. Now that I can think, I realize, wait a minute, not all of what I felt was reality. Not all of what I felt was a problem. Maybe it's okay that I feel that way and I can look at why I think that and what can I change.
And often it's not an invalidation. When you say not all of it was real, it's not an invalidation of the truth that you went
Absolutely.
to. It never is.
No.
It's only acceptance of and often appreciation of, oh my goodness, I see you. We want to
Mhm.
be loved and accepted. And
Uh-huh.
that love and acceptance that we want, if we aren't willing to offer that to the past us, if we're just denying everything that she's still speaking to us today and denying that she even existed, how can we expect other people to appreciate and we want to be appreciated and seen, but yet we're not even appreciating and seeing our own selves and what she's offering us from our past. What did all of that journey look like for you specifically?
Honestly, it took several years and it looked a lot like several rounds of counseling because I would go to the counselor and we would work through some things and I would think I was good. And then all of a sudden something would happen and I would fall apart again and I would realize maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. And it looked like a lot of intentional conversations with our family because I finally learned the term about 3 years ago. The term glass child refers to the sibling of anybody with a special need because a lot of the focus, a lot of the resource goes to the kid with a special need, whether that be a physical or mental disability, mental health problem, anything like that. And the sibling looks normal by comparison. They look fine by comparison. So people look right through them like they're glass. And hearing the term, that there was a term for it, was really validating. And then starting to talk through with my parents and with my friends and with my counselor and with some other people that I'd met along the way who had a similar story and saying, wait a minute, this really did happen. Wait a minute. Part of it is on me because I let myself be silenced and I didn't ask for help. Because I didn't ask for help, people thought I was okay. And part of it is on them because they should have known that I needed help. If they couldn't handle it, how in the world was a child supposed to be able to handle it and be okay? And so it was recognizing where I could have done better, where I would do better in the future, and recognizing what was beyond my control that I just had to forgive and let go.
Yeah. Dr. Christy Marley, she articulated a few episodes ago. She articulated that so clearly. The concept of,
Mhm.
especially we've been through trauma, we put up these walls of we're in fight mode, we got this, we're strong, we're tough. And so many times we don't articulate, hey, we look like we got this, and we don't articulate, I need help. I
Mhm.
really need some help in this space. And you're doing that for women now. So, what does that look like when you're able to help other women and you even look to the future possibility of what that's going to look like in the future?
So far, it's been a lot of one-on-one conversations with women God has brought into my path who had a similar story. And it's the weirdest thing because when you've gone through trauma, you can recognize that look in somebody else's eyes. And you can say, oh, I know that feeling. And you can give to them and be to them the help you wish someone could have been for you. And when you can look somebody in the eye and say, I understand. My sibling had a severe mental illness as well. It affected me as well. People didn't notice me either. And when you can look them in the eye and genuinely connect because you have been there and you felt that, the other person tends to just almost fall apart because it's that all of a sudden you are seen, you are known, you are understood, you are validated. And when that is something you've never had before, it's a powerful moment. It's why I keep going. It's why I started building an online community to be able to do that for so many more people than just the one or two that I meet on the street. It's the power of being seen and being known and being heard.
Yeah, because that's what you were missing in your life for so long. So many times we try to fill that space, but really what fills that space is God and nothing else.
Mhm.
Nothing else can fill that void of love and acceptance that we truly need other than that one puzzle piece, that God sized hole that we have in our heart. Nothing else can fill it. What did your journey
Yeah.
with God look like through the years?
Through the years, I have always known that God was there. I made him Lord of my life before the twins even came into it in a backyard VBS when I was about 4 and a half. And I am so thankful that I had that foundation because I honestly don't know that I would have survived without it. Because I knew that there was God. I knew I heard his voice. I could read my Bible. I could see that even in the Bible, there were stories where it was dark sometimes, but there was always a thread of purpose. There was always a plan. There was always hope. Somehow or another, God always worked it out. And that thought got me through quite a lot. By the time I was 10 or 12, I was pretty suicidal, actually, because my adopted siblings were going crazy and life at home was literal hell. There was so much spiritual warfare going on. And my parents were at their wits' end trying to deal with that. And I had hidden it so well that nobody knew that I was affected. And I didn't know how to help. And I didn't see an end because, as far as I knew, this was going to be my life forever. I saw no hope of change. And I can distinctly remember one time I was sitting on my bed and I was just crying out to the Lord. And I was saying, why is this my life? Why is this my pain? And I still tear up thinking about it. I just heard his voice as clear as day. And he said, don't you dare. Don't you dare give up. I have a call on your life. I have a plan for you. And that got me through every day after that.
And the call is to help other women and help them out of that same moment. That same moment.
Absolutely. To be the help that I never got.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love just taking that in and just letting God fill that space in that moment.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I tried to fill it with a couple other things too, but none of them stuck and none of them worked except for God.
Yeah. I think we've all done that. We've tried
Hmm.
to fill that God-sized hole with other things that never will fit. And often it's the things that we are trying to make fit because we're doing it in our own way. And even sometimes a good thing. it might feel like a good thing or look like a good thing, but it's not a God thing. And that voice of God into your heart, hey, I've got a call on you in that moment. There's no mistake in it. There's no mistake
No.
in it.
And that was the thought that got me up out of my bed every morning or kept me going when there was darkness everywhere I looked and I didn't know. It's the grace of God that I survived my childhood. It really is, because when you live with someone with a severe mental illness who is also violent, there's a lot that goes on. When you live with somebody who's smart enough to hide it from your parents, there's even more that goes on, and you just learn to hide and protect yourself any way you can, and you know that you can't protect yourself, and it's all God.
Tell me about the house burning down.
Yep, they seared in my mind. I was I had just turned 12. We had actually just moved towns. So my only one of the twins was in the home at the time, and he was homeschooled that year because we moved in the middle of the school year with my dad being in the military. And every morning we did Bible study as part of school. So that was 9:30 every morning. And so we went in just like normal, and 5 minutes later, we hear this noise and we look, and there's just black smoke pouring into the
Mm.
hallway. And we all freeze for about half a second because it's just surreal and it doesn't quite register. And then my mom jumps up and she's like, "Get out of the house now." So we get everything and run. My adopted brother ran through the smoke out the front door. The rest of us ran out the back door. And we were just in the backyard looking around, going, "This can't be happening. This can't be real." And then my mom realizes she left the phone inside. So she takes a peek, and she thankfully it was on the counter right by the door. And so she grabbed the phone and she's calling 911. And I'm grabbing my younger siblings and we're getting across the street to, get as far away from the danger as you can. And then my mom, 911 says the fire trucks are on the way. My mom hangs up with them, calls my dad. 10 minutes later, the fire trucks still haven't showed up. So I call 911 this time to see where they're at, because we were right on the edge between two fire districts. So they were taking a while. And I remember just standing there looking at the smoke coming out of my house and thinking, what now?
Mm.
And then the firemen showed up and they put out the fire. And then the arson unit showed up and started asking us all questions. And I remember thinking, oh boy. And then the next day it was confirmed that my adopted brother had lit a match in the basement and burned the house down. And we lost 90% of our stuff. Everything that we did have smelled like smoke. I went to church the next day and these ladies were just standing around going, "Did you hear there was a family that had a fire? Who smells like a campfire around here?" And I had to raise my hand and say, "That was me. I'm the one who smells like smoke. These are one of like two or three outfits that I've got at this point." And we couldn't tell anybody it was arson either because of a couple other things that were going on. And so then I'm just sitting there with this secret going, I can't tell anybody. And it really felt silenced all over again. And I don't know if you know this about preteen girls, but they're not really the best at understanding other people's trauma
Yeah.
without some help and some coaching. And I was not in a place where my peer group had that help and that coaching to support me well. And so they all just kind of avoided me because they didn't know what do you tell the girl whose house burned down? Like, they didn't know. And I didn't know. And the adults in that space at that time didn't know how to help either. So everybody just kind of drifted away. And in the middle of all that pain, I was even more alone because the people that I thought I could talk to walked away.
So you felt isolated from your friends. You didn't feel like you could rely on family. Your siblings were the ones causing. What was your support during that season to get you out of that space?
There wasn't much. I knew clear as day that God had a plan and he had to, and so I clung to that thought. And my biological brother and sister and I, we would sit there, but we didn't know how to help each other. So we just kind of sat there in pain together. And my parents were looking for counselors, and eventually we found one. And the only reason I went is because God smacked me upside the head and said, "You've got a choice, woman. You can go down this road of bitterness where you suck the joy out of everyone around you." And he brought to mind somebody in my life at the time who had chosen that path and was like, "You can turn into that, or you can walk this hard road and you can heal." And I decided to walk the hard road and heal because I knew that that was the best choice, even if it wasn't the one I wanted to make. It
Mm.
sounded hard. It was hard. And now that I'm farther along in that journey, I can say it's worth it. And I'm definitely continuing to pursue that healing and help others who are just starting out. But in that season, my support looked like my parents, who I sort of saw as support and I sort of saw as the reason all of this happened. And so that was something I had to work through. And a counselor who thankfully listened to the voice of the Holy Spirit and knew what we needed. And over the next several years was able to help our whole family heal and recognize, okay, this was the trauma. These are the coping skills we can take when we're triggered. These are how we start learning to think differently because we're not in survival mode anymore. This is how we start looking at the world a little bit differently. Not everybody you meet is trying to kill you. Not, basic
Mhm.
things like that that a lot of people take for granted that I had to relearn.
That self-protection wiring is it's the real deal. It's
Oh, it goes
real.
deep. It goes deep.
Yeah. When you when you learn just a little bit about brain science and neuroplasticity and how you wire your brain to self-protect,
Mm.
the way that in that space you wire your brain because people are unsafe, it's a coping mechanism and it's
Oh, it
intentional
is.
and it served you. It kept you
For a
alive.
season, yeah.
Yeah, you needed it.
I
But
did.
then what happens is you've still got that there, and safe people need to come into your life. And that
And you don't know how to let them.
you've got to, it's like coding. I'm learning
It is.
online business and
Uh-huh.
integrated in the back of the online space, there's this programming that's coding, and we're coded a certain way. And
Mhm.
even going into this code, I feel like, ooh, I shouldn't be in here. I'm going to mess something up. This space isn't for me. And that's exactly how it feels when you take a new step to rewire your brain. You're like, oh, this is not for me. This is not right. I should not be doing this. This is not safe. And that's exactly what your brain tells you when you try to take the new
Mhm.
path, to make a new path in life, to make a new decision. But you think of the Bible, think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and how they went through the fire and they came out on the other side of their fire and they didn't even smell like smoke. But maybe you did smell like smoke in your moment. But guess what? Your not smell like smoke miracle is that right now you're on the other side and you have tools in your hand and you're using those tools to help other women. And that is a miracle. So maybe your miracle
It
doesn't look,
absolutely is.
yeah, maybe your miracle doesn't look like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but you have it and it's visible and we see it and it's beautiful.
The Bible character I've identified quite a lot with was Mary Magdalene, because we don't know too much about her, but we know that she was demon possessed, which literally, living in hell, living with all of that going on. And then Jesus calls her out, and all of a sudden she is just testifying to his goodness and his glory and is one of the witnesses of the resurrection. And I look back and I'm like, I went to hell and back because Jesus pulled me through. And now I can testify to the goodness of God and to the power of his healing, because there is no other reason I can stand here and smile today.
Beautiful. And we all have that. We all
Yeah.
have a reason we can smile. Every one of us. No matter, you know, I'm no special unicorn. My story is not better or more extravagant than someone else's. But my story is valid. and it happened and it was real. And the thing that I needed to do was acknowledge it so that I can heal, and that you're offering that space to women so that they can do that. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. I love it.
It's one of those conversations that needs to happen because everybody that I talk to about glass sibling in this community that I'm building, they say, "Oh yeah, there is a lot of support out there for kids who have a mental illness, and there's even some support out there for the parents." And I say, "And what about the siblings?" And they say, "Oh yeah, that is a need." And it makes me laugh a little bit and cry a little bit at the same time.
Definitely needed that you're recognizing and seeing them. I just pray that so many women who need to be seen and recognized, they find your community and that they find the love of God there and the healing that they need whenever they say things out loud that they've never said before, and release them and allow healing in that space and joy, and the joy that's just the Lord, to come into that place.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you
Mm.
would say to someone who's maybe not shared their story before and they have these feelings, but they feel a little selfish because this adopted child had a really bad life and then they came into their home and maybe their circumstance wasn't as extreme, but they did feel unseen. What would you say to that person?
I would say the same thing a wise mentor once told me. Just their pain does not invalidate yours. Maybe they did have a rough life, and we are glad that they get the help or at least the opportunity to accept help and a family that loves them. And I am glad we were able to offer my adopted siblings those things. But the fact that they had a horrible traumatic life before they came to us does not invalidate the trauma that I had after they came either. And it doesn't invalidate yours. You do have a story that is worth telling, that is worth hearing, that is worth sharing. And it's hard to take that first step and start sharing it when all your life you've been told by either by words or by actions or just by circumstances to sit down, shut up, and take it. It's hard to start talking, but once you do, there is power and there's healing that comes with the release of that pain. And that is something that I would love to help them with if they'll have me. And if not, I pray that they find somebody who can.
Beautiful. Where can they find your community?
So it is glasssibling.com, GLASSSIBLING. And
Awesome.
we are getting off the ground, getting started, and I am looking forward to seeing plenty of women in there.
Amazing. You're going to help so many. So if you want to connect, I'll have the show notes down below, and reach out to Shari and tell her how much her story meant to us today. Thank you so much, Shari, for sharing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It has been an absolute honor.
As always, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you like what you heard, I'd love to know. Leave us a review and share with a friend that could use an overcoming story so they can move closer to their purpose for their lives by renewing their mind the way God intended. Hey, friends. Thank you for listening. You're now done with step 1 of growing together at the Mindset School. Head over to themindsetschool.net and grab my free download where I share 5 tips when you can't hold it together anymore and continue your journey to smiling authentically from the inside out.